The 611th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Alton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
Oh, they're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play, stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Thursday night on the eve of the next game for Carolina. They're back in action Friday night against North Carolina Central. That game will come your way 9 p.m. On the ACC network from the Smith Center in Chapel Hill. We're here to get you ready for that matchup, tell you everything you need to know about the opponent, look at this game from Carolina's perspective, give our keys to the game, pick the game, and so much more. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to legendary football coach Bum Phillips for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, "You work to strengthen your weakest link, not to worry about the strongest one," end quote. I think that's really what non-conference play is all about. You know, strengthening your weaknesses to get you prepared for conference play. And I think that's really the case this year for Carolina with the way that they have scheduled and the way that their schedule is kind of outlined this year, where they've got a handful of marquee games, but a lot of games at home against mid-majors that should allow them to get a lot of comfortable wins, but really allow themselves to work on them before they get into ACC play. And that's what this next opponent will offer on Friday night. North Carolina Central traditionally has been a good program under LaVelle Moton. That's a program that has made the NCAA tournament quite a handful of times. They've kind of taken a step back here in recent years. And even with Seth Trimble out, the expectations for Carolina, one, to get a win, but play at a high level on their way to doing so here tomorrow night.
Yeah, no, I think this is what Carolina's hoping to do, is that this is going to be one of those blowout games where they get to work on some of their weakest links. We talked about it in the last edition of the podcast. We're hoping that, the shooting comes along for Carolina, but they also have to figure out the backup 5-man. That's a weakness at this point. And so this is one of those games that provides an opportunity to be able to get a look at that front court and figure out what exactly you're going to do up there when you don't have Henry Vasar on the floor. If you have to have Jaron Stevenson out of the game at the same time, well, what are you going to do? Who are you going to play in those positions? So I think this is one of those perfect games to be able to work on stuff like that. And this is an opponent that presents, maybe Carolina's weakest opponent that they face all year long. So it presents an easier matchup. So hopefully Carolina will be able to get into the bench and figure some of those things out.
Let's set the scene for the game against North Carolina Central. Carolina 3-0 all-time against the program. All 3 games have been played in Chapel Hill. Most recently, they played back in 2020, a 73-67 win for Carolina in that particular game. Hopefully, the game tomorrow night will not be nowhere near as close. You look at the Eagles in depth, they bring with them just a 1-3 record so far on the young season. With losses at NC State, they lost that game 114-66. They lost at Virginia 81-62. They lost at Appalachian State 76-54. Their lone win came at home against Bluefield State, that by a margin of 77-61. Just 2 players averaging double-figure scoring right now for the Eagles. Gage Lattimore is their leading scorer. He is averaging, though, 24 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, 2 assists. He's shooting 47% from the field and 62% from 3. And then Corey Carvey is their other double-digit scorer, 16.3 points, 9.5 rebounds, 3 assists. He's shooting 48% from the field and 40% from behind the 3-point line. You mentioned this could be one of the worst teams Carolina plays all year long, and KenPom would definitely reflect just that. As of Thursday, when we are taped this, they entered today 347th overall in KenPom's rankings. Their adjusted offensive ranking of 99.2 is 313th. Their adjusted defensive rating is 115.3. That rates out of 354 teams. And a reminder, there's 365 teams that to play in Division I men's college basketball. So they are literally at the bottom, half in terms of all these rankings that that a lot of college basketball people use to kind of justify or quantify how good a team is. And so this is a game that if Roy Williams was the head coach, he'd say, look, we're more gifted. We're the better team. We got more talent, more God-given ability. With that in mind, though, Carolina's got to come ready to play. Probably don't like the fact it's a 9 p.m. tip because it's just going to create a sleepy environment. Don't think the crowd's going to be nowhere near as energized this Friday night as it was last Friday night against Kansas. But, for Hubert Davis and the coaching staff that were pleased with the win on Tuesday against Radford, this is a chance to see their group take another step, being much more consistent and get closer to playing a complete 40 minutes of college basketball.
Yeah, this game should look a lot like Central Arkansas. I mean, this is a team that is just as bad as Central Arkansas. I mean, in terms of the MEAC this season, NC Central was projected to finish 6th in the conference. Now, there are 2 worse teams than them in their conference. I find that hard to believe, especially after you got beat as badly as you did by App State. App State, not a terrible program by any stretch, but certainly not a program that should be manhandling NC Central the way that they did with Laval Moten still as their head coach. I mean, you look at, their offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. I mean, the offensive efficiency is bad enough. I mean, being outside of the top 300 is pretty bad. I mean, defensive efficiency, they are literally one of the worst teams, one of the 11 worst teams in the country on the defensive end of the floor. So Carolina should be able to score a lot in this game. It should be easy to shut down this offense. And so I'm hoping that we're getting something similar to what we saw against Central Arkansas. Maybe you don't win by 40, but I'm hoping that, after about the under 12 timeout in the first half, I think we should have an idea that Carolina is going to win the game and probably will be able to win it pretty handedly. And I think that's what you're hoping for, is just that Carolina during this stretch where they play some of these lesser teams is able to show some dominance at times. I get it. You're not going to show it every single night. Radford, I think, is a much better team than people are giving them credit for. I think, they were projected, as you said, to finish 4th in the Big South. I think they are probably going to finish higher than that and could be fighting for an NCAA tournament berth with some of the talent that they had that transferred down onto that roster this year. This roster doesn't have that type of talent. I mean, Gage Lattimore, certainly somebody that you have to watch out for. A guy that's scoring 24 a game is certainly a dangerous player. So they got to be aware of him. Same thing with Corey Harvey, especially, he'll be matched up probably against Henry Vasar a lot. So for Vasar, this is a chance to flex the muscle again against a guy that's off to a pretty good start, but show that, that was against lesser competition. This is against the best of the best. And so I'll be interested to see how this game plays out, but I'm expecting that Carolina should be able to control this game just like they did that Central Arkansas game.
You look at this game from Carolina's perspective, they bring with them a perfect record. The Heels are 3-0, and they are ranked 18th in the current AP poll. They do have 4 active players currently averaging double-figure scoring. They would have 5 if Seth Trimble were active, but of course he's sidelined with the broken arm. Caleb Wilson leads them in scoring 19.7 points, 8.3 rebounds, 3 assists. He's shooting 62% from the field, 33% from 3. Henry Vasar, the second leading scorer for Carolina, 17.3 points, 7 rebounds, 1.7 assists. He's shooting 68% from the field, 43% from 3. Luka Bogovac is averaging 11.3 points, 3 rebounds, 3.7 assists. He's shooting 36% from the field, 26% from 3. And then Kyan Evans, the last double-digit scorer that's actively playing right now for Carolina, 10 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists. He's shooting 55% from the field and 43% from 3. We gave you North Carolina Central's KenPom numbers. Here's Carolina's. As of Thursday, Carolina is 27th overall in KenPom. Their offensive rating of 118.1 is 23rd in the country, and their defensive rating of 97.0 is as good for 32nd right now in all of college basketball. Let's get to our discussion topic before we give our keys to the game and pick the game. You look at some of the losses that North Carolina Central has suffered against ACC schools, primarily against NC State, where they lost 114-66, and then they lost to Virginia 81-62. They haven't been competitive, and that's not a surprise, but when you see a 114-66 box score, that's going to catch your attention. Don't want to give too much credit to NC State and the Wolfpack, but that's a statement being made in more ways than one. Considering the fact that Carolina's coming off the clunky performance against Radford on Tuesday, where they won by 15, but they shot less than 40% from the field, less than 30% from 3, and missed 18 free throws in a game that we expect to be non-competitive. Do style points matter? Does how this game look for Carolina matter? Should this be a game that when we come back on here probably Saturday morning and recap the game, should we be talking about, yes, a big-time win, but a win that Carolina looked really good on both ends of the floor while doing so?
Yeah, because, I mean, that's the expectation when you take on a team that's as bad as this is. And with where you are at as a program right now, you're a top 20 team in the country. I mean, you're ranked 18th. You should be able to handle games like this with relative ease, and you should be able to control the game and put up, get some style points when it comes to these types of games. This is what you took on when you decided to play this type of schedule. When you play this type of schedule, when you are Carolina, you have to have some style point wins. And they did it against Central Arkansas, so there's no reason to think that they can't do it against a team in NC Central who I think is probably just as bad as they are, if not worse, based off of what we've seen so far this year. I mean, yeah, this is a team, as you said, they let up 114 points in a game. Now, am I expecting that Carolina is going to come out and put up 114 points? No. Am I expecting them to even win by as many as NC State did, 48? No, I'm not expecting that. But I expect that Carolina is going to be in control of this game from the word go. You're going to have a very comfortable cushion at halftime, and it's going to sustain through the second half. This should not be a game that, and I point back to this definitely a lot. I think we as a podcast point back to this. This should not be what we saw against Elon last year. If you get in one of those types of games in this game, then that's going to bring up some concerns about where this team is ultimately at. And that might sound weird. You might say, well, that takes away everything that Carolina did in the game against Kansas. It doesn't take everything away from it, but it would certainly have you, a little confused as to what exactly this team is if following that Radford performance where things were a little clunky, and you did struggle in certain areas, if those same struggles pop up and once again you come out with a clunky win. So I think Carolina's got to find a way to win this game comfortably. The good news is I think they can do that against this opponent, which doesn't provide many challenges for Carolina.
I think the good news is that you're coming off a game where obviously Carolina didn't play well. And it's not just the coaching staff that talked about that. I thought the message from the Carolina players was what you wanted to hear, where they acknowledged, yeah, we won, but we left a lot out there. And, Caleb Wilson did recorded his first double-double. He was 4 of 13 from the field the other night. Mm-hmm. He is going to be motivated to bounce back in a big way, and there's no one on Central's roster that can handle him. And so I think he'll look to have a couple highlight plays or two. Henry Vassar, I think, is – showing what he can be in terms of highlight dunks, whether it's dribbling, off the dribble drive or catching alley-oop passes from Kyan Evans, Luka Bogovac, whoever it is. So, and I do think it matters because, Kerry, the fans are expecting you to win the game, but I think fans right now, this time of the year with this schedule, I think fans want to be entertained. And I think they want to see a fun style of basketball being played, which Carolina is definitely capable of doing that with the way they want to run and gun and shoot a lot of threes. So, we have this conversation a lot in sports about style points and how ultimately they don't matter because all that matters is winning. But when you play a long season like the college basketball season is a 6-month marathon, and you've got this schedule this year where you're playing a bunch of low mid-majors, then, yeah, I think we want to see Carolina obviously win the game, but we want to see them look good while doing so just to kind of really justify and supplement what they did against Kansas and some of our thoughts that we had entering the season where we thought this team had a ceiling capable of making it all the way to the Final Four. With that, let's go ahead and get into our keys to the game. We got 3 of them, and then we'll make our picks. The first thing I wrote down for this game, Anthony, was to get off to a fast start and look better offensively in the first half. And look, I wasn't disappointed with the way that they looked the other night in the first half. You knew it was going to be a little different without Seth Trimble, who, is a 4-year player, knows what to expect, is an emotional leader for Carolina, is their most athletic guy on the perimeter. And it led to some different lineups having to be forced out there because, Kyan Evans got in foul trouble. So did Caleb Wilson. But, with less than 8 minutes to go in the first half, Carolina had 22 points. And I think that's just that's a very low number for how explosive Carolina's offense can be. They still haven't shot it well in the first half, really, in a game this season either. And I think that's another thing that you'd kind of like to see start to get going in the right direction with, your trip to to Fort Myers, not too far away. And, St. Bonaventure is really, really good. And we all know Michigan State's a top 15 level program on a consistent basis. So, that for me, the first thing I'm going to be looking at is how do they start this game compared to how they started the game against Radford? And overall, can they look a lot better in the first half in their second game without Seth Trimble in the backcourt?
Yeah, I think this is one key that, for Carolina could be here for a while until we actually see it. You're right. They have not gotten off to a fast start really in any game so far this season on the offensive end. I thought against Central Arkansas, they were really good defensively, and that's what allowed Carolina to get the lead that they did. But they didn't shoot a great percentage in the first half. We know they didn't shoot well in the first half against Kansas. Come out in the second half, go off, put together one of the best second halves that we've seen under Hubert Davis, if not the best. And then, the other night against Radford, clunky was the best way to really describe it. Even the offense looked like that early on in the game. Shots just weren't falling. They were getting good looks, but they just weren't falling. Hopefully those shots start to fall here. But I think the big thing in this one is that, you're hoping that Caleb Wilson has learned after what happened the other night. He's going to be a guy that needs to just stay under control when he's out there on the floor. I get you want to contest every shot. You're a guy that's trying to show that you're hustling on every play, but there's some times where you don't necessarily have to jump in the air and take an unnecessary foul. You don't have to reach in at a certain point when they're calling the game extremely tight. And so with him being on the floor, I really do think that Carolina should be able to have a much better half offensively. I think you feed him, you feed Henry Vesar early, and then let the other guys sort of settle into this game, because that's what they've done so far this year. So, I mean, I think that's probably the game plan for Carolina going into this one. But yeah, you got to be able to get off to a fast start on that offensive end of the floor. And by being able to do that, I think is going to take them being better in the half court in the first half. They were good in the half court in the second half the other night, but this is where you need a guy like Luka, who we talked about being someone that can create in that half court space. This is where you need him to step up, especially now that he's in the starting lineup and you don't have Seth Trimble. You got to find someone that can attack the basket. And I think that's something that Luka has the capabilities of doing. But he has to be able to do that. And you want to see other guys like Kyan Evans. That's another guy. Attack the basket a little bit. I thought the other night he did a really good job of sharing the ball. And things will be easier if you're driving the basket and you can kick out to a guy that's open when you draw a double team or something like that. So hopefully that's something that's being stressed by Carolina, is to get those easy baskets in the first half and let the shooting settle into the game, because as we've said, this is so far is not a great shooting team. Relying on that outside shooting in the first half, as we've seen in the last couple of games, doesn't necessarily work for Carolina.
Yeah, look, there's so much focus and attention on the perimeter shooting, and rightfully so. But when you've got the size advantage that Carolina's going to have with Wilson and Vesar, they should want to play inside out, run their high-low offense as much as they've really ran it so far this season. And Carolina's guards should be able to take, Central's guards off the bounce and get to the cup really just about whenever they want to. The second key I wrote to the game was to convert at the foul line. One thing that Carolina's done a good job this year of, and this is the benefit of being long, tall, and athletic, is they get a lot of rebounds, they force a lot of fouls, they get into the bonus a lot sooner, a lot quicker than they maybe have in years past. But you gotta make your free throws. Carolina missed 18 free throws the other night, and that's just far too many, no matter how many attempts that you took. And had they, shot 80% from the foul line, they would have scored, well north of 100 points in the ball game. But that was not the case. The biggest reason why I wrote this down is this time of the year, you're still setting the tone for the type of team you're going to be. And if you continue to miss free throws, then that's going to carry over into the next game, into the next game, into the next game. And we'll have no choice but to say we don't trust this team at the foul line. I would imagine that with 2 days in between games, or really with 2 days of practice in between games, they would probably all shot, I'd imagine, a handful of free throws, working on their mechanics, making sure that was down and put the ball in the basket. But it doesn't matter what you do in practice. You've got to go out there and you got to execute in the game. And this is a game where I expect Carolina to be in the bonus early. I expect Carolina to be in the bonus often. And with that, I expect a much better free throw shooting performance than what I saw there night against Radford, where they were 31 of 49.
Yeah, I mean, the percentages were not great in either of the last two games for Carolina at the foul line. And so you want to see that improve, because when you get into games later on in this non-conference season, and then when you get into the conference slate, you got to be able to make your free throws, man. And the thing is that we thought coming into the year, this was going to be a pretty good shooting team. And so maybe those struggles shooting the basketball just in general have carried over to the free throw line. But if you're going to get there, you've got to be able to make foul shots. And again, we're not saying that the other night you needed to be 47 of 49. That's a little extreme, but you should have been much better than shooting 63% from the foul line. Against Kansas, you were 11 of 17. If that game was closer, that would have been one of the reasons why, is because Carolina wasn't able to convert when they got to the foul line. Those free throws are so important for Carolina in these games. And you talk about style points and gaining them in games like this. This is where you've got to be able to do that, is in these non-conference games against NC Central, against Radford, eventually against Navy. Like, you've got to shoot the ball well at the free throw line, because that allows you to put the type of distance that you want to between you and the opponent. If Carolina, I said it on the recap podcast, if Carolina even makes half of their misses, we're talking about Carolina blowing out Radford in this game. Game's not even close. There would have been points in this game that Carolina probably would have been up 30 on Radford. But because Carolina did not make the free throws at the foul stripe, there was only one guy on the team that went to the foul stripe and didn't miss a free throw. That was Kyan Evans. So hopefully in this game, Carolina shoots it a lot better, because you're right. I think they will be getting to the line often because of the talent gap, the inability of Central to stay in front of Carolina's guards. So you'll see some fouls on the back end. When that happens, you got to be able to convert once you get to the foul line.
Last thing I wrote down for this game kind of piggybacks off a discussion we had coming off the Radford win, was just to get better, more consistent production from your bench. Carolina got 21 bench points in the game against Radford. And I think it's a healthy number, but I do think, right now with Luka and Jaren Stevenson both starting, you wanted that number to get maybe closer to 25 on a much more consistent basis. And I think you're really looking at Jonathan Powell to be that guy coming off the bench that you can turn to and expect to get 10 to 12 points on a consistent basis. The problem is, I think, is he's carrying a lot of the bench production burden on his own shoulders. Whatever you get scoring-wise from Zayden High and James Brown, that's the icing on top of the cake, man. There's not a whole lot those guys offer from a scoring production. I think when those guys are put in, they're going to be there to rebound, to defend, and to give Henry Visar a chance to catch his breath, because both guys have really struggled this year to play consistent minutes without fouling. Derek Dixon has only played 3 college basketball games. I don't want to start putting too much on his plate. And Jaden Young, I think, has really struggled in his first handful of games as a Tar Heel to look like the guy that I thought was going to be a lot more valuable than many Carolina fans thought when he transferred in from Virginia Tech over in the offseason. So the good news is I believe Jonathan Powell can be that guy. I think the bigger thing, I want him to just be more aggressive. I feel like sometimes he's too passive when he's on the floor. We brought you in to shoot the three and shoot a lot of threes. Not saying that 4 threes per game off the bench isn't a bad number, but if that number wants to tick up to 5, 6, 7, I'm not going to complain about that, because I know we can shoot 38, 39% from behind the 3-point line. But, until Carolina gets Trimble back and they can readjust their starting lineup, you want to be able to get some more consistent production out of your bench. This is a great game for that to happen, because they should be able to play a lot of minutes, get a lot more confidence, get a lot more rhythm, and hopefully be a lot more impactful here moving forward.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Powell, he was solid the other night. I mean, he is the only guy off the bench that had a plus minus. He was plus 19 when he was on the floor. Everybody else on the bench was a minus. And everybody but Isaiah Dennis, who came in late in the game, were minus double figures. So that's the thing that I think when you look at the bench production, you're looking for more from, is not only on the offensive end, but these guys got to be able to defend too, and defend without fouling. So I think that's really what you're looking for. You could stand to find a little more efficiency from guys like Derek Dixon, Jaden Young. I mean, yeah, Derek Dixon, 1 of 5 from the field, not going to cut it most nights. You need to be able to knock down some of those shots, especially if you're going to take 4 from beyond the arc. And same thing with Jaden Young. Jaden Young, that was one of the things that we were hoping by coming to Carolina we would see from him, is a little more efficiency in a lesser role than he had at Virginia Tech. That's not what we're seeing right now. So you need those guys to be a little bit better. But yeah, it's ultimately going to come down to what can Jonathan Powell do. And I get what you're saying. There are some moments where he does look a little passive. I think part of that is that, he's trying to get the ball to some of the other guys that are scoring in the game instead of, just taking over the game himself when he comes in. He doesn't want to be that ball stopper. But there are certain times where he gets a good enough look. You just have to take it from the outside. We trust that you're going to be able to knock down those shots, with what we've seen from your time here and what we saw in your time at West Virginia. And I also like the energy that he brings defensively. That's why I think he's a fine bench piece for Carolina. But yeah, I mean, at this point, with the lack of production that you're getting from some of the other guys on the bench, I guess you want him to get into double-figure scoring coming off the bench. But I think that for him, it's mostly you just want to see him be confident in himself, confident in his shot from beyond the arc, because that is ultimately the biggest strength that he brings to this team.
All right, let's not waste any more time. It's time to make our game predictions. Carolina enters the game with a 98.8% chance to win, according to ESPN's analytics. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Yeah, I think Carolina wins, and Carolina wins pretty comfortably. Carolina was faced with an opponent like this to begin the season in Central Arkansas, and we were wondering what would Carolina look like after what we've seen the last few years in some of these games that Carolina has played. Carolina came out and absolutely blew Central Arkansas off the floor. I think you're going to see something very similar in this game. I think NC Central is a really bad team, as we've seen, especially defensively. So I think Carolina is going to get some real efficient looks. I like Caleb Wilson to be able to bounce back offensively in this game. I think he's going to be extremely motivated after that performance, even though it was a double performance where he had 13 and 14. I think he's going to be motivated to show that that was just an off night and that he is going to be a guy that consistently is going to be able to give you 20 a night. I think there is no way that they're going to be able to stop Henry Vesar from doing what he has been doing so far this year. He is off to a great start, so I expect that to carry over. And I expect, Luka Bogovac to really be in a little bit more of a rhythm than he was to start the season. He's not coming off the bench now. He's a starter. And that second half the other night really showed some of the potential that he brings to the table. I think you're going to see that in this game. I think Kyan Evans will be better in this game as well. Just 3 points, only took one shot in that game against Radford. I expect we'll see a little bit more out of him, which when he's clicking, that's when Carolina's at their best. So I think this will be a pretty comfortable win for Carolina, even if they don't necessarily get the production off the bench that they're hoping for. I think the starters will carry them and get them a pretty significant win.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins. I think Carolina will win going away. I'd love for them to beat them more than NC State did, just so I can talk crap to NC State fans that are bragging about their fast start to the Will Wade era. I don't think that happens, though. I don't think Carolina is going to be looking to blow North Carolina Central out the way that NC State did, but I think Carolina will bounce back, and we'll have a fun podcast to talk about because I think Carolina might play, from start to finish. Maybe it's the best game we've seen them play so far this season, and then we're excited to see what they look like here tomorrow night. Reminder, 9 p.m. tip. Game will be on the ACC network, and the game will be played at the Smith Center in Chapel Hill. With that, folks, is going to wrap up this edition of the show. In the meantime, we will direct you guys to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Busy weekend for the website with Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football, both in action. We'll have you covered with game previews and recaps and any news and notes around either program. So make sure you get to the website every single day. Again, that's HeelToughBlog.com for the latest and the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we strongly encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. If you're a video consumer of the podcast, best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Both those can be found. Just search Heel Tough Blog or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. And the second we click that live button, you'll be notified and you can be right in. You can jump right into our conversations around Carolina basketball. With that, folks, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Doing Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you for watching and listening. And as always,